welcome back to the UIA Trusted Partners Podcast. On today's very special episode, I have Blake Martin, owner of FranNet of the Heartland. And if you think that name sounds familiar, you might have seen him emceeing the Omaha Empowerment Breakfast by chance. Blake, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today.
I'm so happy to have you on the show. First and foremost, I love the emceeing that you're able to do because
Thank you.
It's a tough gig to do anyway, but you do it with such grace that it seems very, we'll say, easy for you. So
thank you.
Kudos to that. And then, of course, hearing that you're the Match.com of franchisees to franchises, I had to know more about this because that is just too good of a hook for me to just pass up. I'm that curious fish. So for the listeners who may not have had a chance to hear about you yet, or FranNet of the Heartland, what is it? What can it do for people? And more importantly, who's the man behind it?
I don't know about that last part, but I can tell you about the first part of this question. So, we are. If you chose me from a drop-down menu, it'd be the category of franchise brokerage or franchise consulting, interchangeable terms for the same thing. But we are indeed the Match.com for local entrepreneurs. Great. Which kind of describes what we do a little bit, right? So we provide no-cost coaching and consulting to serial entrepreneurs, corporate refugees, or anybody that's looking to start a business and they're not quite sure what kind of business is the right fit for them. You know, it could be their third or fourth business. Right. It could be the first one and they're thinking about getting out there and they see a little bit of security in franchising because it's a known path and learning from other people's mistakes and successes. Yeah. So we provide that service to folks oftentimes who are saying, I want to do something, I want to do my own thing, but I just don't know where to start.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense because I'm sure that's a lot of people in the world, I imagine. They sit there, they get burned up and they go, I want to be my own boss. And they have that thought process begin. So again, we've already touched on this. You refer to it as the Match.com of franchises. I love that tagline. I can't get enough of it because it's so true. You guys do amazing work, and I want people to kind of grasp this for a moment. You work with nearly 4,000 different franchises, or roughly around, right? First of all, that's unbelievable. Second of all, how do you boil that down to get some good options to choose for your clients?
Yeah. Well, that's a big part of what we do. That's the value that we provide to folks because you're right. If you're thinking about starting your own thing and you say, okay, well, I'm going to minimize the decision set by looking at franchising, you're in for a little bit of disappointment. There are about 4,000 franchises out there. I think the last time we looked about 3,900.
Wow.
We help to mitigate the risk of investing in the wrong one by beginning with, our organization for almost 40 years now, 38 years, we've spent our time analyzing, vetting, and screening what are the top performing franchises out there of those 4,000. They can't all be top performers.
Sure.
So we've cultivated a portfolio of about 200 of those top 4,000. That's still a lot to choose from.
Yeah. Much more palatable, though.
It's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
And because we're a franchise system ourselves, right? We practice what we preach. So I am a franchisee of an international organization called FranNet. We know a little bit about what good franchises look like and where there could be some risk with the not so perfect franchises.
Sure.
So we screen them based upon the criteria that you should be looking at: franchisee satisfaction, profitability factors, culture, are they built for growth? And from there, we can begin the narrowing once we understand what the ideal business looks like for the individual, the couple, the investment group that's looking for something. Yeah,
and I love that. I imagine a lot of that conversation is, they come into you, and I'm sure a lot of it is, I have this idea. I just want to be a boss. But I just want to do this and this and that. And I imagine that's kind of like the shotgun spread, so to speak. How do you help rein that in for people? Again, you kind of talked a little bit about that process, but what is it that really can help rein in that person's focus?
Begin at the end.
Interesting.
So what I mean by that is before we get into specific brands, specific categories, before we even know if franchising is right for you, because it's not, I'm a franchisee. I can tell you it's not right for everybody. It's a phenomenal business model that can create affluence and opportunity for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to make it in business, but it doesn't mean it's right for everybody.
Very true.
So when I say begin at the end, we begin the conversation with, what are we trying to achieve here? Not just professionally, but personally. What are the pain points that we're trying to get away from, and what are the pleasure points that we're looking to add? That could be more flexibility. I want control over my schedule. I want to be more present with my kids. But we ask people to get very specific about that. Yeah. It's not okay to say, I got to get out of the rat race and I got to relight the flame. Okay, that's a start.
That's a great broad picture.
Let's talk about what that looks like. Let's talk about the 5-year home run. And if we came back and sat down together after we found a business and you said you knocked it out of the park 5 years from now, what does your life and your professional career need to look like in order to be able to say we hit a home run?
That's such a great perspective to have people think about for a moment.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm sitting here thinking about that myself. If I was in those shoes, I'm sitting there going, well, what would I want that to be in 5 years? And, that does cause a good sit down, stop for a second. Yes, you want to be your own boss, but what does that really look like? Because like you said, it's not for everybody. Franchise is a tough industry as well. Yeah. It's not just a walk in and everything's golden roses, paved gold bricks the way through.
Oh yeah, I've never had an issue with my business. I know what you're talking about, Dylan.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And it's not always the right time.
Sure.
Right? So, and I don't just mean the black and white easy part of the decision is, okay, does the funding make sense, right? Yeah. Are you going to get yourself too far out over your skis to invest in any business, franchise or not? And it might mean, okay, now let's talk about what you want to have in place, what you want to get right as far as the time you can put into a business, the money you can put in, and then perhaps we revisit it at the appropriate time. That happens a lot. And I'm proud of the fact that I work with folks who, we first talked years ago.
Yeah.
And they come back and say, I think the time is right now.
I love that. Again, it's that planting the seed, so to speak. That's always kind of the overused metaphor, so to speak. But
we're an agrarian society. It just makes sense.
We're in agriculture. But it is such a powerful thing to have somebody you trust, and you really want to work with. Just have that point of touch, like, hey, how's things going this year? And then they follow up with a year's down. It's like, hey, now. I think it's now.
Yeah.
What a cool feeling. That's got to be kind of a surreal moment when people do that for you too. So very, very awesome industry and very, very good at what you do as well. I've heard nothing but good things about you. So kudos to that.
You talk to a lot of people, so thank you.
I shake a lot of hands. I talk to a lot of people. But yeah, everybody always, if I mention your name, they're like, oh, I love Blake. He's a great guy. So, I've never heard of an ill word uttered about you, which I think is 38 years of business, I think is a testament. Because that just shows that you're doing honest business and you're doing good business. Yeah. So I love it. And leading into my next question for you, again, we talked about it's not all roses and sunshine for the franchises. And sometimes people kind of have a real close, maybe a shell, so to speak, about it. They kind of push back on any and all ideas that they're not super knowledgeable about or 100% in on. How, or maybe what are some of those first few objections that you kind of run into, maybe getting that conversation started?
Yeah. Great question, by the way.
Thank you.
One of the first ones is, if we're able to go through our process and identify something that really seems like a match, and let me take a quick step back. Absolutely. What I mean by that match, and the match.com of local entrepreneurs, is those 200 franchises that we've cultivated and put into our portfolio. When we do that, we work with them on understanding, if you had a franchise owner in your organization who you could clone, and you could have 10 of them, who are they and why? And let's analyze what that franchise owner looks like.
Right.
And then when we're working with our clients, we begin at the end, but we start building towards, we're going to create a blueprint for what the ideal business looks like for you. The matching piece comes in is when we've completed both of those, and then we look at, do we see synergies? Do we see real close connection points between the organization and the investor's priorities? And so that's where we'll start the research process. Why wouldn't we, right? If we're seeing these matches, let's begin. Let's hunt with a rifle rather than a shotgun, right? And oftentimes the pushback I will get, people will say, well, I've never even thought about being in that industry that you're suggesting, Blake, let alone worked in that industry. Understandable. When franchising works well, one of the things that makes it very different from hanging your own shingle is they're bringing the know-how. Yeah. They're bringing the stuff, and they're bringing the processes and systems to help you implement that know-how. They don't necessarily, in almost all cases, they don't need or want you to be the practitioner.
Sure.
They want you to be the leader of that organization that's leading practitioners. So how many McDonald's is the most famous franchise, right? How many McDonald's franchisees owned burger joints before they became McDonald's franchisees?
Probably not a lot.
Yeah, pretty much none. A handful in the beginning, perhaps, right? The point is, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's franchising, he gets credit for this, whether he actually said it or not. The success of our organization has nothing to do with teaching people how to make great burgers, and everything to do with teaching people how to run a great business that just happens to make burgers.
That's an interesting kind of way to phrase that too,
and it's a different way of looking at business ownership, right? So right from the beginning, let's focus on how you're going to grow and scale this thing, how you're going to bring the people and the resources in, rather than you building this business, but then it can never outgrow you. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a particular love or passion for that business or knowledge of that business, that's okay. What is important is, can you see that this business is going to allow you to have those things that you're looking for?
Right.
So again, beginning at the end, what are we trying to achieve? Can this business give you that flexibility? Can it give you that scale? Can it give you more time and presence with your children? If it can do those things and replace your existing income in due time, then we might be onto something.
Yeah, and I mean, it just kind of thinking of it from an outside perspective, it kind of seems silly that you wouldn't kind of trust somebody of your caliber to say, hey, here's an option for you. I think it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard for me to sit there and go, I can't imagine somebody going, Blake, you're in this for 38 years. Nah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
Just kind of sit back and like get away from it. I can't imagine something like that you're going to put in bad info or bad franchise in front of somebody. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, my business model is like a realtor, right?
Yeah.
So if I try to push somebody into a home that isn't a fit for them, it's all going to fall apart at the finish line, and nobody's happy. I don't get a penny out of that. So
nobody ends up happy, and then on top of that, then they got nothing nice to say.
That's also a very good point.
We all know how that one goes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to kind of take a sidestep from FranNet of the Heartland for a moment, because I'm going to shine a spotlight on you.
That's awkward.
It is, right? I need one in here so I can just
I guess it's already on me.
Right? But I just wanted to take a moment for the listeners to kind of understand the man behind the business, so to speak, and the franchise here, because you have obviously over 2 decades of experience in this field, 38 years into this. You obviously have small business ownership. You are certified franchise executive and a graduate of the University of Michigan psychology program.
Yeah.
Digging deep in this one. You also, just to tease you a little bit, we also have an awesome podcast, by the way. I did take a listen to it last night. I kind of was unaware of it, to be completely candid with you. And then
there's a few podcasts out there.
There are.
I don't know if you knew that.
I know. There's a couple.
There's a whole bunch to choose from.
I know. And there's more than enough to go around. But no, I saw it on your website. I'm like, I got to tune in. I just got to see what it's about.
Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it's fantastic, actually. So I encourage people to go onto your website, go take a listen to it.
Heartland Franchise Guy.
Absolutely. Or find it on all major Spotify or podcast platforms, we should say.
Yeah.
So YouTube, Spotify, Apple, I'm guessing as well. So
correct.
All those good fun stuff. Now, that is just the professional highlight. I just want to reiterate that for listeners. Just the professional highlight for Blake. Now this is kind of the thing I consider the outside of the professionalism. This is you doing this because you are you. And this is all of these volunteer. I just want listeners to grasp this. You volunteer with the Business Ethics Alliance. I'll have you kind of break down some of these acronyms for us too. There's SCORE. You have Off Its Boots and Business Programs. Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative.
Correct.
Of course, the 50 Mile March, great friends of the show. NBDCs and FranFit program.
And NBDC is Nebraska Business Development Center.
Okay. I love that. So Nebraska's Business Development Center. Yeah, I'm not going to get tongue-tied here. But then I'm very curious, what is SCORE?
So SCORE is the free mentoring and coaching arm of the SBA, Small Business Administration. Yeah.
I love that.
So kind of hiding in plain sight ever since 1965 when they founded it. The SBA looked around and said, look, if we're helping people secure funding for a business, shouldn't we try to find a way to give them some guidance as they're getting ready to open their doors or as they're growing and they're looking for assistance? And so it used to stand for Service Corps of Retired Executives.
Oh.
And now they just kind of went the KFC way. They just went with the acronym SCORE. Largely because there's retired executives that are a part of it, but there's also a lot of aspiring retirees like me.
I love that.
So it just wouldn't be bad. Like, do I have to retire to volunteer here?
I love that. But again, I just kind of wanted to shine a little bit of a light on you, the person, because you're involved with so much. You do so much. I just got to know, what's compelled you to just be so active in all these amazing, nonprofits, to volunteer work, to emceeing the Omaha Empowerment Breakfast, to just being involved so much in this community?
I'd have to say that the root of it all is my parents, right? Yeah. So I am one of those very fortunate people that, as I look back on, how I was raised and who I was raised by, I have zero complaints. I'm a very fortunate person in that regard. And I know that I need to be grateful for that, because there's a lot of people who, probably 99% of the world, who would love to have the opportunities that I've had. And so I do feel a sense of obligation to give back, to pay it forward for what my parents did for me. And they were big in the community in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I grew up, and they still live there today in the same house that they raised me in. They've had that house for like 70 years. I can't imagine what the return on that investment is going to be when they move out.
No kidding.
So they were big volunteers, and particularly my mother, who retired when I was born and really became a professional volunteer.
I love that.
And I felt like if there's a way to give back to the community. Now, when I started in this community 20 years ago, almost to this month, what I've seen in the 11 years that I lived here before I started the business was, this community has done a lot for me in Omaha and Nebraska. And so my other motivation is giving back because of what this community's given me. I've been fortunate to have a lot of success with this business since that time, in the 9 years that I've run it. And I feel like that, I don't feel like, I know that has a lot to do with a lot of other people giving of their time. So I have an obligation to give back for that.
I love it. I think that it's a place of passion that compelling feeling comes from. You just got to do it. Yeah. And I love that. I think that's so genuine about you as a person anyway. It just kind of reiterates your professional side to me, because you act similarly in the professional sense. Like, hey, I'm obligated to help you find the best fit. Yeah. I'm not going to throw trash in your face and call it a pile of gold. So I love what you do. And I think just wanted to highlight you as a person for a moment, because you behind the business that's helping so many people. Yeah, it's important to know who you get to work with.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate that.
Of course, we'll follow up here. You have the Omaha Empowerment Breakfast that you go MC.
Yeah.
Various networking events. How do you manage that all and still give the best service for your clients?
3 answers there.
Love it.
And they all have to do with, I don't try to do it all by myself, right?
That's a great answer.
So first, surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me. So any of those organizations that we're talking about here, the 50 Mile March Foundation, right? Yeah. Jay Morales, Brianne Schuler, these folks, they're the leaders of that organization. I try to be a part of and contribute where I can, but I'm not going to try to be the leader of every organization I'm in, because they're better leaders. And that's their purpose. So being a part of organizations where I can surround myself with people that are sharper than me. The Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative. It's a collaborative of 18 organizations. And we take turns being facilitators of it. But at the end of the day, it's leveraging everybody's network and leveraging everybody's know-how.
Right. Love that.
The second answer, which I think is very pertinent to what we're talking about here, is never underestimate the power of a franchise organization. So one of the reasons I'm able to accomplish so much in a day is because I joined a really strong franchise organization. So FranNet, my consulting firm, we are part of a franchise system. I have a home office. I have a team of advisors and peers all over the country that I can lean on for assistance. So whether that's helping me with the content and creation for social media, whether that's providing me the tools and the resources to help get some of the marketing done, whether that's building some of the technology that we utilize to help more efficiently work people through the process. Yeah. I didn't do any of that.
Sure.
My franchisor brings that to the table.
Yeah.
And so those systems, processes, and tools that they build, I don't care. Nobody's ever driven down the road and seen a FranNet billboard and said, I got to have some FranNet today. And that works if you're in a McDonald's franchise, right? Or a Cold Stone Creamery.
Right.
But it doesn't, and I don't care, because I didn't join this franchise system because I expected the general public to know the brand. So those systems and processes that they build are incredibly important. The third answer to that question is I married up.
There you go.
If there's ever been the definition of a guy out kicking his coverage in a marriage, it's myself and Shannon. And she runs the show, right? She runs the show at home. She runs the show on the IT and the finance side of the business. And she just makes things smooth in my world. And talk about surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you. Yeah, that's been my greatest achievement.
I love it. And you know what? Honestly, that's honest advice for people. And I think that's what's so cool about that is just, you're not always the smartest guy in the room. No. Don't always try to be the smartest guy in the room. Sometimes you just got to take the back seat, which I think is so important, especially when you're trying to grow yourself as a person, let alone a business at the same time.
Yeah.
But continuing on with our conversation here, not to side subject, I love the 3 answers, by the way, because normally I'm struggling to get an answer from somebody on a tough question like that, but that was great. Now, listeners out there, they might want to know 2 things here. If they want to start a franchise and they're looking and they're thinking now might be that time to have the conversation, where do we begin? What's the best way I reach out to you?
Sure. Get a hold of me directly, right? The whole value of our system is we're hyper local, right? So call me on my local number, 402-415-3651, or email me.
And I'll have that contact info down in the description. So
bmartin@frannet.com. Pretty easy. So you'll get the spelling right. Just reach out to me directly.
Love that. Now, the second half of that question, I'd like to ask, you might have some listeners out there that this might really engage them. They might want to join in with the FranNet kind of industry and franchise there because they want to feel that same sort of satisfaction and comfort of building things together with people. Comfort might not be the right word, but experience of building things. Comfort might be a stretch on that one. But I'm curious, how can they maybe reach out to you, or what's the best way to really get started in that career path?
Don't wait.
Don't wait.
It's Love like that. A lot of life's advice on big decisions. So the reason that we structured our fiscal model the way we did, if you're working with me and you say, Blake, I'm looking for a business, you're never going to get a bill from me. So because our business model works kind of like a realtor or like an executive recruiter, if ultimately down the road you find something and it's a match and you decide to move forward, I get paid by that franchise organization, right? So the reason we built the model that way is, 2 reasons. One, to make sure that we didn't ever have to limit our advice or guidance based upon, oh my gosh, I can't afford another hour with you, Blake. As long as you're willing to take the process seriously and you're engaged in it, I can't want it more than you.
Right.
But if we want your success equally, then we'll spend time with you. The second piece of that, in addition to there not being an expense to it, life's major decisions never happen because everything's going to be perfect. You're 100% sure it's all going to work out. Nobody would ever have a child, get a car, take another job, get a house if they were certain 100%, right? Nobody's ever been 100% certain that she's going to say yes when you get down on a knee, right?
That's true.
So life's major decisions, you have to be willing to jump in and take some action. And it might not be the right time, but the only way to find that out is to pick up the phone, send an email and say, I want to do this. I want to figure out if this is the right time, and we'll start the conversation. And we'll know within a couple of discussions, does it make sense to continue talking now?
Yeah.
But if you never pick up the phone or you never send that email, it's the old saying, right? I'm sure you've had people say it on your podcast before. You will miss 100% of the shots you never take.
You're the first one to say it. So congratulations.
Well, mic drop? Can I do a mic drop
here? But and you're absolutely spot on. I've been kind of in that same mindset here this last year, kind of wrapping up last year into this year. I've been having these, like, man, I should really try to dabble back into some commercial work, just kind of at a home sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of dragging my feet about it. But you know what? I'm going to take a little advice and not wait. I'm going to get some real numbers in front of me. I'm going to have a real conversation about what that looks like now. So
I know a guy that can help you with that.
I know a guy that might be able to help me with that. So, yeah, we'll be talking, I'm sure. But what you can offer for your clients is almost par none. I don't think I can find an equivalent in our back door right here in Omaha that does exactly what you do and can help people the exact way you can. I don't think it's possible to draw a comparison. That might be a little biased because I think pretty highly of you, honestly, because, I mean, again, never heard a bad word. Always, you seem like you're very approachable, very fun, and very happy to be wherever you are at that particular time, which is always a nice thing to see. So I do kind of want to just, again, highlight you as the person here before we move into this, because you have a wonderful free video online that are 10 frequently asked franchise questions. I want people to go listen to this video and watch this video, first of all, because they're great questions on there. And I didn't rip them off. Don't worry, I didn't rip off all these questions and put them in here. But I would ask you, what would you say is maybe either the most asked question out of that, or maybe just a typical response that you get for asking a client a certain question?
Yeah. Another good question. So the most asked question is, can I afford this? Right?
Yeah.
So name a franchise.
Let's go Subway.
Okay. Name another one.
Jimmy John's.
Yeah. So almost always what comes to mind first is food and beverage because it's so ubiquitous. Branded. It's ever present. We see it there all the time. And it's an industry category where we all have to eat, right? So the frequency of those brands being in front of you is important. And they have the AAA real estate, right? Yeah. So we're seeing them on the street corners. So it makes sense. So in almost every person's mind, unless they're already in franchising and they're coming to me for another one, in almost everybody's mind, when they're coming into that Q&A with me, they're thinking about those big bricks and mortar, AAA real estate. Whether they know that those categories exist or not is irrelevant. And they're thinking inventory and a lot of employees. And so it's only fair that they ask, can I afford to do this? Well, we don't know yet, but with some confidentiality and some probing questions, we can figure out what's your investment comfort zone, and we will, and there's no cost to that either. But what I can tell you is almost all the people that I end up talking to about that are very pleasantly surprised when they realize there is a whole range of investments in franchising. Yeah, I mean, there's big investments in businesses like food and beverage where you can invest 7, 8 figures if you want to.
Wow.
But the vast majority of the people I work with we're talking about investment ranges that are a tiny fraction of that, right?
Right.
And are very reasonably priced, especially when you consider what you get in exchange for that initial investment.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's, again, just furthering what you can do for your client just by having that conversation. So if you're thinking about it, you're in that position to start. We're talking with Blake Martin, owner of FranNet of the Heartland. Give him a call today. Email him today as well. Description's down below, or I guess the info is in the description down below.
Right.
Now, you also had a little deal on your website. I wanted to point out that there was a free kind of like get started kind of estimate kind of deal before they even have a conversation with you, it looked like. Is that just, I didn't click into it, so I'm kind of curious. Is that just a quick little...
It's like a free financial estimate, right?
Right. Like just a brief info. Here's kind of what we're thinking. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the gist of it there?
Yeah, it is. So we have a couple of tools on there that we get it. Sometimes people aren't ready to talk to a guy, right? Even if it comes on a referral. Dylan tells somebody you should really go talk to Blake. I'm not ready yet, right?
Sure.
We get that. So we want to try to kind of meet people wherever they are. And if they just want to go onto the website and they want to do a quick mini self-assessment, the entrepreneur profile, the short version of it, they can do that and get a feedback summary on here's the types of things you should be contemplating. It's not going to spit something out and say you need to own a Runza or you need to own a Fibernew.
Sure.
Right? It's going to spit something out that says here's the directional thought process that you might want to plug into.
That's interesting.
And then the other piece, which I think you were specifically referring to, is you can do sort of a quick and dirty, entirely private, anonymous. Here's a couple of fields of what my financial picture looks like. And what could I expect as far as funding? There's some predictability factors in franchising and in lending. So we can give them a pretty good idea of if you have this much liquidity and you think that your credit score is this, and here's the amount of money you might be willing to put up for an investment, you can get a pretty good idea of what that's going to look like and what you could afford. Because all franchise companies have to disclose to anybody that's going to invest with them, here's what it costs other people. Here's the investment that other people made. And it gives you even a range because it may have been less to start that Fibernew, shameless plug for a alumni client of mine, than it did for that same client to open up an assisted living locators out in Seattle, right? So they give you a range, but these are real numbers.
Yeah.
And so I know that information, and we can give people a very realistic appraisal of does it make sense? Even before you ever talk to somebody like me. So if you're not ready to have a conversation, you can still get that initial feedback and just kind of get some directional guidance on what's next.
What might be the first step to take there? And I think that's really approachable for, again, maybe somebody who's maybe a little on the shyer side or just not super into
shy?
meeting.
I don't know what that means.
We don't know what that means, obviously, but it's this made-up word that people apparently are apprehensive to talk to another. I don't know. But I figured I wanted to bring that up just for those folks at home that maybe, again, the face-to-face maybe isn't their strong suit right away.
Right.
They want the numbers and they want the info right away. True. So I just wanted to make a mention of that because, again, you guys offer so much. I encourage people to check out your website so they can get the full picture. I am kind of curious, though. You are a man of events. You had an awesome one to wrap up last year. I'm so curious. What is on the docket here coming up for the new year?
So just before the filming of this 2 days ago, we had for the Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but it's EEC.
Yep.
So this is 18 community resource organizations, including some of those that we already talked about, like SCORE, the SBA, the Nebraska Business Development Center, the Greater Omaha Chamber. There's 18 organizations involved in that. And we just started our 9th year of programming where we put on no-cost advocacy and education for aspiring and existing entrepreneurs. And we just had Van Dieben, another great local podcaster, to do a session, because it's January when we're recording this, to do a session on motivation and how to hit your goals and how to reset your priorities. And it was the 5 Ds for success, and it was phenomenal. So we couldn't have started our 9th year of programming off with any better of a bang. Yeah. And our next session is coming up. We do about 6-7 events a year. Some of them are virtual, some of them are in-person hybrid. But March 11th, we have our next one coming up, and it's on AI applications for your business.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And what you notice if you go to either our website, so you can Google Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative and you'll get to our Facebook page, or you can go to this website, sourcelinknebraska.com/EEC Nebraska. And you'll see the archives of all of our programming that we've done over the years.
That's awesome.
The intent is always to make it something that's very applicable and action-oriented. So you're going to walk out of there with tangible things that you can start doing tomorrow and make it relevant to all industries, not just to one category or one kind of business owner or operator.
I love that. Free education for people is a powerful, powerful thing to offer anyway, let alone something that can weigh that heavily on, hey, here's an actionable you can take out of this right now.
Yep.
I love that. And all for it, and all for things that encourage more growth in our community. So again, check out that full list on your website. You have a full list of events tab there.
Indeed.
And March 11th, get signed up for it. Do we need to sign up?
Yep. Got to pre-register for it. They
up.
do fill up. Yeah. I can, it's not a marketing pitch. Like we do run out of seats.
I was going to say, you are, when I say he's a man of events, people go to these events, so they are very busy and very well trafficked. Now, I also just want to throw in a little mention there, a little shameless plug for our friends over at the Empowerment Breakfast.
Absolutely.
First Fridays of every month.
You bet.
Now you can catch Blake on the MC. You might see me as a speaker one of these days, but we'll see.
And the Omaha Empower Breakfast is national now.
It is.
So they got events already going on in Sarpy as well as Omaha. They've got locations opening up in Colorado, in Chicago, down south.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I was blown away that they're that branched out now. Yeah. And I was like, that's so cool. First of all, just started here and kind of blew up to be this really cool thing. So very, very shameless plug there for the Omaha Empowerment Breakfast. We'll have to get Michael on here for an episode of the pod. Now,
just don't put his on right before mine, because that might affect the viewership of mine. I'm not gonna look so dynamic if I have to follow him.
I don't know. He's pretty sharp, but I do want to bring up the fact that every business, every opportunity, everything in the world, I feel like, has challenges.
Yeah.
You're going to run into them whether you like it or not, whether it's emceeing the Omaha Empowerment Breakfast, whether it's volunteering and something goes awry. There's always a challenge.
But the AV always works perfectly, right?
Of course.
Like on your podcast, you never have problems with this stuff, right?
Never any audio problems ever.
Camera never falls down.
Yeah. It doesn't just stop recording sometimes. No, it never happens. I am very curious for you with FranNet of the Heartland.
Yeah.
What are some of those challenges that you've maybe either had to overcome this last year or maybe in recent years or maybe some obstacles that you've had to help clients actually navigate because just random life happens kind of moments?
Yeah. The franchising industry, although there's a bit of a risk mitigation and security because you're joining forces with somebody who's been there, done that, gone through the economic evolutions, it doesn't mean that we're any more immune than every other industry from macroeconomic changes. So my short answer there is COVID and inflation.
Yeah.
Right? I pride myself on not just helping people start their businesses, but trying to do whatever I can to help grow them.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit and we suddenly realized this isn't going to be a 2-week shutdown, my phone started to ring. And it was my alumni clients in many cases, which I felt honored that they would reach out to me. And so trying to help them in conjunction with, of course, the advice that they were getting from their franchise on how do I turn this business into a more virtual business? How do I meet my customers in a new spot when I can't see them face to face anymore? How do I manage the challenges of my finances?
Right.
And not that I'm helping with all those things, but the reason you see me networking out there in the community is I probably know somebody or several somebodies that is an expert in that area, and we're going to get you that help, and you're going to combine that with what you're already getting from your franchisor, and that's going to give you a leg up in finding the right solutions. Yeah. So the EEC, that's when that organization really blew up, because since we had the SBA and SCORE involved, we were one of the first ones around to do sessions on what is this new EIDL loan for businesses? What's this PPP thing? And should I be afraid of it? Is it really just a loan that I'm going to have to pay back later? And walking through that with the people who were administering it, being able to be a part of that and get that information out to people was incredibly important.
Yeah, that's an incredible time to have somebody reliable.
Yeah.
That is a testament to that as well, because I could not imagine in your world how many texts and phone calls you probably got in a day, especially when the announcements were like, it's going on for 6 more months.
Right.
And I imagine
and all you can really do at that point is lead by example.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to change and adapt things. And I changed and adapted very quickly in the types of businesses that I suggested to people. I swallowed a big pill and held my breath and said, the right thing to do is to reach out to current clients that are going through the process, and let's have a meaningful conversation about, should we slow down this research?
Sure.
It was scary. I'll admit it, right? I had been in business for a while. I've been in the franchising field at that point in 2020. I've been in the franchising industry for 20 plus years, but it was still a scary moment to say, I have to be willing to practice what I preach. I might have to talk customers of mine out of doing business with me. It was not fun.
No, and then I can't imagine the mental stress, just almost the torture of it, of just saying I have to fire my clients, essentially.
Well, and it was, I wrapped my head around, I'm not saying fire, I'm just saying let's open up the conversation to something new and different and understand, what are we going to need to know about this pandemic? The same conversation when inflation came up, by the way, because that was the second part of my answer. What are we going to need to know about the impact, and what are we going to need to be able to measure? What are the additional questions you're going to need to ask the franchisors that you're talking to and their local franchisees about? How does this impact things short-term and long-term in your industry and within your brand? Let's just make sure that we add those conversations in. Maybe you don't have to slow your decision-making cycle down, but you do need to make your questions and the feedback that you're getting a more robust conversation,
a little more
to include these new and very relevant factors. Maybe there's a way that this becomes an advantage for you. And I will tell you that in several instances, folks sped up because they realized those franchise organizations with additional resources, human resources, knowledge, and financial resources, they were better able to adapt more quickly and meet customers' needs with getting curbside, for example, if it was a retail business, getting the message out there digitally. And they saw that as, this is an organization that is proving to me as I'm going through this research that they know how to help their local owners adapt. And so in some cases, it actually turned out to be a benefit. It might have changed their cycle for if they needed bricks and mortar for that business. About half of the businesses I work with need that. The other half are more like mine where they don't. So might have changed the timeline after they signed on the dotted line, but any good franchisor was being responsible about, we're going to hold off on the investment right now. We'll put it in writing that we're going to get into business together, but let's make sure that that we structure this on the right timeline.
Yeah, good intentionality going forward is key.
Yeah.
Now, you brought it up a couple times, the current situation that we are in the economic standpoint, inflation, and it's rough. It's no benefit for anybody right now, it feels like. And unfortunately, my industry gets thrown into that with insurance.
Sure.
Wait,
have things changed in insurance? I wasn't aware of that.
You haven't seen your renewals yet?
Yeah, I guess. Yes, I have, Dylan.
I only mentioned that because, prior to these awful California fires that we're seeing, Nebraska was last year the #1 loss state.
Yes.
Just for full transparency for people, we were the highest loss.
We have hail, we have wind, we have temperature extremes.
And the bad part about this is now everybody's really starting to see those impacts to the premiums.
Right.
So again, it's felt all the way around because I feel it, especially now that I'm getting into the commercial space to help business owners with their businesses on my side of things.
Yeah.
I definitely can understand their pain points because I'm one of the pain points. You have to have the insurance. You have to have what I can offer you. The problem is sometimes that price right now is pretty rough.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing I can really do about it. And there's nothing I can call an underwriter and say, hey, can you lower this down by 10% for this business owner? He's a great guy. But, it just, I definitely feel the strain coming from the business owners because they're in the frustrated situation. Now they have to take a look back and go, okay, well, can I uptick this and charge because I got to offset a cost somewhere, or do I have to let somebody go?
Right. Yeah.
It's really tough all the way around, and I'm really curious, in your situation, your stance on this, how has that really impacted, potential new clients coming towards you and some of the old clients reaching out and saying, do I shift? Is it time to get out of this one and look at a new one? I'm just a little curious from your angle and your business and industry.
Yeah. So for the existing customers that are already in business, my alumni clients, it's lean into the resources you have. Lean into your advisors, internal and external. Don't try to make these decisions yourself. You need to talk to others. In many cases, it's as simple as what I did when we saw that the impacts of inflation were coming is I talked to folks smarter than me, folks that had been part of my franchise system for a decade or more before, and they had seen the impacts of these types of things. And I talked to them about, what did that look like? What did the exit from that look like? And how do you shift things? And so I advise my clients to do the same thing. Talk to people internally and externally who you trust. Look at what decisions need to be made, but don't just think about this next quarter. Think about 2 years and 3 years from now, the career pathways for people that have gotten to where you are. For the clients who didn't yet own businesses, in most cases, it changed what we were having conversations about. So if we were having conversations about businesses that maybe focused more on disposable income, categories like that, we quickly shifted to need-based and demand-based businesses, right?
That's really smart.
Sorry, Dylan, but I'll add this. Maybe it's businesses that are, the service is actually reimbursed by insurance, right? Yeah. So the customer, the end user of that, like a damage restoration business, right? Fire, smoke, and water. I helped some folks start up True North Restoration franchise businesses here in Nebraska and Iowa. And that had a lot to do with the fact that, hey, if you've got water in your basement or a hole in your roof, whether it's your business or your home, it has to be addressed, right? Yeah. It can't just sit there. And so that end user, that homeowner realizes, well, I sort of already paid into this, right, in my premium, so there's not going to be money out of my pocket for this. And so people are a lot more likely to continue forward with purchasing that product or service, so to speak. And so focusing in on industries like that, education, labor. Again, I'll do a name drop because that's why I'm here.
By all means.
My friend Bernie Inbody that owns all the Express Employment Professionals businesses in town.
Yeah.
Right? They're the solution to a headache that all other businesses are dealing with in the marketplace. They help find temp to perm employees. And so if you can be the solution to the challenge that other businesses are facing, there's a need component of that versus it'd be nice to have.
Sure.
So looking at categories like that, childhood education, youth enrichment, it's the last thing people are going to cut back on for their kids.
Right. No, that's great advice and great tools and great pieces for people to kind of think about. And if they are trying to, chew that in their mind, so to speak, of like, I have the passion, I have the idea, what do I do? Of course, talk to you. You are the professional. You have years and a wealth of knowledge and experience to offer them. And honestly, you're going to know a guy if you're not the guy, you know?
And if you just want to invest in something, you want to put your money in something in the market, invest in insurance, UIA and others. I mean, insurance is here to stay, right? It is a necessary component of our industry.
Yeah, there's a reason why the government doesn't let insurances just disappear out of states. There's a reason for
when the
that.
government steps up and says that can't,
Yeah, I mean.
Very good point.
If they have to get involved, you got to understand that there is a degree of safety to it.
And I mean, when the government gets involved, everything goes right. We all know that. That's not a knock on insurance.
no knock on insurance, but the rest of you go. I'm just kidding. Something that I feel is really, really important in business, and you can probably attest to this too, is celebrating your wins. Yeah. Celebrating all the good that comes about it. Because obviously we can all hyperfixate on the doom, the gloom, the bad in the world right now and everything going wrong. But it does us no good. But what we can do is we can celebrate on some of the major things, major wins, maybe some pride points that you've had, you know, along the way with FranNet of the Heartland, and maybe some wins that you had maybe this last year that were just really stand out for you.
Well, the first one, first of all, this is the easiest softball question because big picture, the biggest win is just the friendships that I've built with the people that I've gotten to know, who I've walked through this process with. This is not an overnight process. My sales cycle, if that's what you call it, you know, that's anywhere from a few months to a few years, depending upon if it's the right time for people. And you know, you get to know somebody pretty intimately. And so the friendships that I've developed, both with folks that have then gone and successfully built businesses. I've tried to help them through their struggles and successes and watch that. I mean, it's very fulfilling to see that. And that includes folks that maybe they never did start a franchise, but we got to know each other really well, and priorities and goals and what they wanted to achieve in their life, what they wanted for their kids. And so just knowing that my business has afforded me that opportunity to build those kind of relationships with neighbors and neighbors across the country is it's a pretty special thing.
That is pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And again, this is across the country. I mean, FranNet's
people
just
all over the country.
Spot. So I love that. And again, I just think, again, it's nice to celebrate the wins. I think it's great that you are a relationship builder first and foremost, rather than, hey, I'm going to sell you a franchise right now because I don't know anything about you. Yeah. So it's a relationship first. And we try to do similar things in our field, but you know, insurance is a little different feel than if somebody's going to have your back running a franchise. Yeah. You're not going to call your insurance guy every month and be like, hey, you know, I'm just looking at my policy. Do I need this?
Right.
You're not going to call me every month about that. And if you do, I'm not answering. I'm just kidding. I will help you, but only once. Now, I am very curious, and this one is a question I think a lot of listeners might find a glimmer of, you know, something, not hope, but a glimmer of information just to snag onto and a bite out of this.
Yeah.
What is something you'd like listeners to know more about when it either comes to FranNet of the Heartland or about franchises in general?
My first answer applies to both of those. And franchising is all about locally owned and operated businesses. Too often, people make the uninformed connection between a chain business and a franchise. The reason franchising has worked for so long, for nearly over 100 years, is because it is all about a national or international brand that's implemented by locally owned and operated locations. So just like all the folks that I've helped get into business over the years, my wife and I own 100% of our business that happens to be an LLC that's established in Nebraska. We volunteer locally. We donate locally. Anybody and everybody that we help with employment is local. We pay taxes locally.
Hey.
And so we're no different than, actually, it's a good comparison like an insurance agent, right? Yeah. You hitch your wagon to a brand, a carrier that has been there, done that, has the successes, learned from failures. It's no different in franchising. So yes, I pay a percentage of royalty for all the support that I get from my franchisor, but that doesn't mean that there is economic activity that's leaving the state or revenue that's leaving the state. In fact, I've been able to generate a lot more revenue and tax revenue.
Which is a healthy problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a good problem to have because of the growth that the franchises helped me with. And that's the case in almost all franchises. So we're not a Home Depot. We're not a Costco. Right. We're not a Walgreens. Nothing wrong with those businesses, but we're locally owned and operated. And we care about the local community as much as the independent, locally owned and operated businesses do in town.
I love that. Now, one question I had kind of glossed past, and I was trying to find a good way to word it, actually. Yeah. It was more or less what I was doing in my brain here. Now, I'd mentioned previously that you're a graduate of the University of Michigan.
Yeah.
From the psychology
Go Blue.
program. Something like that.
You're totally cutting that out, aren't you?
We'll just have it like the warped audio of AI, just like, go red.
Sorry.
That would be a great little joke there. But I am kind of curious here. Has there ever been a direct correlation that you've been able to kind of pick up on from your degree in psychology there, or graduating from that psychology program, to what you do now and how it really benefits what you do?
That's a really good question. So probably like most people over the decades that have graduated with a degree in psychology, I thought, well, that was fun. And unless I continue on and get years more education, maybe I'm never going to use that. Yeah, if I'm being honest, and I've told my kids this, I chose psychology. Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, but at least that's a skill you can use. I never thought that I would use it directly because I got right into business. But what I realized very quickly is understanding how to be good at business development has a lot to do with understanding what's motivating people, what are their priorities, and helping to dig deeper into what's really motivating them. And that's what I learned in psychology. So when I got into the franchising field, and specifically when I started this FranNet of the Heartland business 9 years ago, I immediately realized the value of what I'd learned. And a lot of these lectures and books that I read 20, 30 years ago all started flooding back into my brain. This is the information that I need to utilize to help people help themselves get to where they want to be. And I remember just shaking my head and thinking to myself, I should have, maybe I'll do this publicly now, what I should have done is reach out to my parents and said, thanks again, by the way, I'm finally using that degree that you effectively paid for me.
I love that. And I'd been chewing on that question since last night, because I was like, I've got to figure out a good way to word that, because I can't just go, how do you use your psychology degree and what you do? But no, it is such a unique kind of perspective to think about that would play such a powerful factor of getting to know somebody and asking the correct questions and asking genuine questions. I think it goes a very long way. Now, broadcast, they tell you how to teach, they tell you how to ask these questions. They don't really tell you the why behind them, so no psychology part there for me. I just know how to ask the questions. Now, that is pretty much the rap sheet of my business questions that I had for you today, Blake. I'm leaving the red carpet out for you before we jump into the personal side of things. Is there anything else you want to let the listeners know about FranNet of the Heartland or about getting involved with franchises today?
I would reiterate again, don't wait.
Don't wait.
Be willing and ready to focus on what is it that you're trying to achieve. Anybody can start a business. It's not easy, but anybody can get it going. Growing and scaling it and getting through the challenges and the nuances of understanding how to adapt to an ever-changing marketplace, ever-changing competitive entry, you have to have something that's compelling you, that's pushing you. And it's rarely just the money.
Yeah.
It's almost always something you want. It's that pain point or pleasure point. So if you're feeling like you want more, you want something different, you're not done yet. You've got that ember that hasn't burned in a long time. That's a great reason to start looking at business ownership, whether it's a side hustle that you just want to start building before you jump into entrepreneurship full-time, or whether it's a full-time thing that you're saying, I'm ready to go. It could be the third time, the 10th time, it could be the first time.
Yeah, I love that, man. Just great advice all the way around. And of course, we are talking to the franchise expert, Blake Martin, owner of FranNet of the Heartland. Now, Blake, diving into our personal side of the things, because I always call this the dessert of the show, because it's usually the last thing people remember. Now, I always like to ask this one because I am not a winter guy at all.
Yeah.
The air hurts my face. I hate it. I'm a summer kid. I have Hawaiian shirts galore. And so I got to ask, is there anything that you look forward to when it comes to winter? I try to find the glimmers of hope here.
Yeah. So skiing, for sure. I mean, again, I mentioned briefly that I grew up in Michigan and spent a lot of my formative years in northern Michigan, where they actually have significant snow always.
Very significant snow. So I didn't realize what significant snow was until 2005 when I lived in Watertown, New York.
Oh, yeah.
Holy buckets. Yeah.
You get feet at a time.
It was literal feet at a time. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. But not to digress there, but I just want,
you
never
understand
seen that. Yeah.
You understand, yeah.
It's real.
Yeah, so being able to ski, and both of my sons have gotten into skiing over the years. Cool. And even though it's not really a mountain, going over to Mount Crescent, enjoy doing that. And then the movie nights with my family. My wife and I both have very busy careers, and things move quickly, and kids have all the activities. And so just being able to steal away for the occasional, whether it's they're watching Polar Express or whatever movie, just being able to take a minute and use the excuse of, well, can't really go outside and play right now.
Yep. I love that. You know, it's funny. This came to mind because it just happened this morning. Yeah. A friend of mine was feeling a little down. I texted her. I was like, hey, you know, not to just make a joke out of what's going on in your life here, but life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you're going to miss it. Which is just a direct quote from Ferris Bueller. I even said that. I'm like, you can thank Ferris for this quote.
Right.
And she got a little bit of a kick out of it. But as you say, I'm like, man, it really does move so fast. And I've noticed that these last couple of weeks because I moved over to the holidays, and just the point from November's end to now, it kind of all caught up with me. I'm like, holy smokes, I blinked and that was just gone. So I really appreciate when people are like, you know, you just got to pause everything for a little while. Mm-hmm. Stop life for a little while and just hang out. Yeah, I definitely love that. Now, man of your networking skills and networking persona here, you are going to have a great list of this. I can already tell. I love to ask my guests, what is your Mount Rushmore of Omaha? Because there's so much here. We're spoiled. There's amazing restaurants. There's amazing venues to go try. There's great art galleries. What do you like right now that you would say, hey, if you're coming in, this is what you got to come see? Yeah.
Well, on the food side, because we always go to that, right? And I think you even put that in my notes for preparation.
Did I? I did. I was like, did I really?
Yeah. Ahmad's Persian Cuisine used to be down in the old market, and now they're out on like 49th and Dodge. We don't get there often enough, but true Persian cuisine. The guy he behaves like and looks a little bit like the soup Nazi. He is absolutely militant about his food being exactly right and the experience being exactly right. And so it's just kind of a show to go in there and watch that happen. So it's not necessarily on the top of the list for people right now because it's been around forever.
Sure. I've never, one of those, I'm not an Omaha native. I'm from the Sandhills originally. Yeah. So, you know, I've been here about 4 years, going into 5, and I'm finding new places everywhere all the time. So that's on my list now to come check out. Anything else on the Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, the College World Series.
Yes.
I love baseball for a number of reasons. One of them has to do with I've got to spend a lot of time on the baseball diamond with both of my sons.
Very cool.
One thing that people, I bet you there's a lot of folks in town that don't even realize this, but the Big Ten tournament for baseball is played here in the same stadium where the College World Series is, right on Schwab Field there. And if you want to see some top-class baseball, you might have to put on an extra layer, right? Because it's still usually cool out. It depends, right? You wait 24 hours, you're in Omaha, the temperature will change 80 degrees.
Pretty much.
But to see some top-class baseball and get the perfect seat for a few bucks, you can't beat it.
No,
you can't beat it.
I think it's highly overrated.
If you can take an afternoon off or even like a long lunch, that's often when those games are played.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, I'd meant to say underrated, not overrated.
I knew what you meant.
The underrated thing that we have right here, and I always like to bring up, Creighton's basketball games and Husker basketball too, because, man, they're so good, and it's such a fun atmosphere to go to. Yep. Any others you want to throw up on Mount Rushmore for Omaha? Oh, FranNet of the Heartland, of course.
Testing the extent of my... part of what I would say is you kind of tripped a trigger there is if you live and work in Omaha, get out of Omaha and see when I flew into Omaha for the first time 20 years ago for my first interview, I hadn't been around Nebraska either. I was expecting flat and corn.
That's where I'm from.
Yeah. And then you see all the hills. But if you go out there and venture into Nebraska, right, into the Sandhills area, into the Valentine area, there is some incredible topography and some incredible experiences to be had. So take a long weekend and just drive out into, do what Charles Kuralt said years and years ago on, was he on the Today Show? I don't remember. He had his own show for that, right? And he said, go out Highway 2. Yeah, he's right. Go out and see some of the stuff in central and western Nebraska. It's a pretty amazing state.
It's a beautiful state.
And there's a whole lot of stuff outside of where you get into those counties where there's a whole lot more cows than there are humans.
That's us.
Which is pretty much the case for everywhere except Omaha and Lincoln. Well, this is why those folks out there like it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those that I've told a few friends of mine, I'm like, if you're ever wanting just a weekend out of town, especially in the summertime when it's nice out, go up to the Calamus. Before you go up to the Calamus, make sure it's evening or so. Go for a little trip away from the Calamus where the lights are and all the street lights are. Drive 1.5 miles away from it down a dirt road. You will never see a clearer sky in your life. I promise you that. Yeah. It is one of the most beautiful sights you'll ever see. It's sometimes certain peaks of the season you can actually see northern lights because it's that clear and empty.
Yeah.
So it is one of those I will always gush about where I'm from because I've never seen a view prettier unless you're talking about a completely different topography.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I appreciate the little shout out to get away from Omaha. That is kind of a nice refresher for the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, last question I've got for you before I cut you free because, man, I've eaten up your day. Hopefully not. But I am kind of curious because you know so many people, so many organizations, and so many just great businesses and people.
Yeah.
What's something here in Omaha you wish more people knew about or supported more?
I'm going to go back to a topic that we've already discussed. A hidden gem in our business community is the Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative, or EEC. The quality of the programming and the quality of the 18 organizations that are involved all across the state of Nebraska and surrounding regions. If you're not plugged into that yet, if you're not on the distro list or you don't get pinged every time something gets updated on our website or the Facebook page for Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative, get plugged into it.
Yeah.
And it's a growing community. And I'm going to cheat a little bit and give a second answer.
Do it.
If you don't know what the 50 Mile March Foundation is all about yet, look it up.
There's a whole episode about it.
Yeah.
We had a three-headed conversation. I had Matt Kluver, I had Brianne, and I had Jay.
So did Matt or Brianne even get to say a word during the whole session?
Yeah, I think they talked once.
I say that really hoping that Jay Morales is going to listen to this episode.
Well, he better. But yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to kind of see you got the executive director side who's got to be, kind of the business end of things. You have Jay who's the dreamer.
Yep, he's the visionary.
Yep, and then we had Matt who was the doer. I'm doing it.
And finished his first March last August, which is awesome.
He was through the moon about that on the show too, and it was such a cool, just a really cool thing to absorb on my side of things. Just such a great energy, great passion behind those guys, and obviously you and I both love that organization, so happy to help support them whenever we can.
Thank you for your support, Dylan.
Thank you for yours, Blake, because, man, you do a whole lot more handshaking, it feels like, than I get to some days. But you're the man for the reason. Of course, the man being Blake Martin, owner of FranNet of the Heartland. Blake, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dylan. I really appreciate it.
Of course. It was a pleasure, and I learned so much about the franchise industry, even more than I actually probably prepared myself to learn, to be honest. I was like, I'm going to learn a decent chunk here. But, man, I'm fully enlightened on the world of franchise, I think, without having the full in-depth of starting one myself here. But, yeah, I really appreciate the passion behind it. I really appreciate the honesty behind it. And I think, if anybody's in that realm, they need to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Of course. And, of course, listeners, we thank you for tuning into the UIA Trusted Partners Podcast. We'll always have more next time.